This week on Under the Radar, we look at Queen Bee syndrome, and more specifically, is it getting worse, as this article asks. And in addition to that, I wanted to take a look at the related question of, do women prefer male bosses? This is something I hear asserted from time to time, but with very little evidence offered. So firstly, what is Queen Bee syndrome? The term was first coined in 1973 and referred to a woman in a position of authority who views or treats subordinates more critically if they are female, and that this may be why, as one study from the University of Toronto found, that women find it more stressful to work for women managers. No difference was found in stress levels for male workers. Now, an explanation for this finding is that there is a sexist double standard at play. That is, when women deviate from stereotypes by, for example, being assertive, they are more likely to be met with incivility. And you've probably heard this asserted by feminists before. Men don't like assertive women. But the interesting part about this article, of which a full-length paper will be published in a forthcoming issue of the Journal of Applied Psychology, is that it is women that are more likely to act with incivility towards other women. Studies show women report more incivility experiences overall than men, but we wanted to find out who was targeting women with rude remarks, said Alison Gabriel, Assistant Professor of Management and Organisations in the University of Arizona's Ella College of Management. Gabrielle and her co-authors set out to answer that question across 3 studies. Men and women who were employed full-time answered questions about the incivility they experienced at work during the last month. The questions were about co-workers who put them down or were condescending, made demeaning or derogatory remarks, ignored them in a meeting, or addressed them in unprofessional terms. Each set of questions was answered twice, once for male co-workers and once for female co-workers. Across the 3 studies, we found consistent evidence that women reported higher levels of incivility from other women than their male counterparts. In other words, women are ruder to each other than they are to men, or than men are to women. This isn't to say men were off the hook or they weren't engaging in these behaviours, but when we compared the average levels of incivility reported, female-instigated incivility was reported more often than male-instigated incivility by women in our 3 studies. Participants were also asked to complete trait inventories of their personalities and behaviours to determine if there were any factors that contributed to women being treated uncivilly. The research showed that women who defied gender norms by being more assertive and dominant at work were more likely to be targeted by their female counterparts compared to women who exhibited fewer of those traits. Evidence emerged in the 3 studies that companies may face a greater risk of losing female employees who experience female-instigated incivility, as they reported less satisfaction at work and increased intentions to quit their current jobs in response to these unpleasant experiences. Paired with estimates that incivility can cost organisations an estimated $14,000 per employee, this presents a problem for organisations. Gabrielle noted that the findings are an opportunity for companies to re-evaluate their cultures and how they address this issue. Well, that's interesting, but you can bet there won't be any call to action from the usual suspects in the spirit of #MeToo to other women about how they need to come together and call out this type of behaviour in the workplace. And this mirrors studies of online abuse. What's often overlooked about online harassment of women is that more than half the time it's coming from other women. And if you want to know more about that, check out a video I did on that topic back in 2016. Now, there is a related claim that because of this queen bee behaviour and other reasons, that women much prefer working for male bosses. Here's a clip from a TV show on this topic from 2015.
Equality in the workplace is certainly an uphill battle for many women, so it may come as a surprise that more than 80% of women don't want to work for another woman. Well, why? Lucy Brogden joins us now to find out more. Good morning, Lucy.
Hey, Lucy. How are you?
This is fascinating research. Tell us about this study.
Well, my study was quite anecdotal. I was doing career coaching a couple of years ago with men and women, broad range of backgrounds. And when you're doing that work, you say to people, what's the next job look like? And I suddenly got struck by the number of women that could articulate the companies they wanted to work for, the type of work, and then consistently they'd say, oh, by the way, I don't want to work for another woman. So I started to track these numbers, and we got to around 80%. I asked colleagues, and they were getting similar numbers. And I knew that was, a small, not very scientific sample. But if you go to the literature, there's huge studies all replicating these findings. Gallup in the US has actually tracked this for 60 years, and we're still not shifting the data too much.
Now notice that she started off talking about her own anecdotal observations and throws out the number of 80% of women saying they prefer not to work for another woman. But then she talks about the literature, and in particular polling agency Gallup in the US replicating these findings. And if you do a Google search on Lucy Brogden, you'll find a number of articles mentioning her work in various Australian publications in 2015 and 2016. So since Gallup has been tracking this data, as she said, for 60 years, let's go to the source. Here's an article from last year. Americans no longer prefer male boss to female boss. So Gallup's latest reading in 2016 is that 23% of Americans prefer a male boss and 21% prefer a female boss, but the majority, 55%, say they don't care either way. Now, of course, that's both females and males. When it comes to females, preferences again are almost identical. 27% prefer a male boss, 28% prefer a female boss. 44% say they don't care either way. Now, to be fair to Brogden, she was making her claims prior to the most recent survey. The 2014 results showed 39% of females preferred a male boss, while 25% preferred a female boss. But that's still a long way from the anecdotal 80% Brogden spoke about. Now, it should be noted that the most recent survey was conducted from November 2nd to November 8th, about a month after multiple women accused Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein of sexual harassment. In the weeks following the allegations against Weinstein, at least 20 other prominent men across a variety of industries have been accused of sexual harassment. The public's current break from its decades-long preference for male bosses could be a sign that recent news events have had an effect, although the shift could have occurred any time within the past 3 years since the question was last asked. Well, I suspect it's had an effect, but it's impossible to quantify how much. And this trend away from a preference for male bosses is also being driven by age. Americans younger than 35 prefer a female boss over a male boss by 14 points, while half say they have no preference. And although women overall are divided in their gender preferences, women younger than 50 are more likely to prefer a woman, while men younger than 50 are divided. Now, we can speculate as to why younger people lean this way, maybe too much soy in the diet, but the fact is it's probably set to continue given the demographics. Anyway, let's have a look at another poll, this time by Pew Research. This one dates back to 2013, and it asks a slightly different question. Who do you prefer as co-workers? Over 3/4 of men and women say they don't care. Of the remaining quarter, women overwhelmingly say they prefer men, even more so than men do, and of course this is before any sexual harassment panic. So even though it appears the Great Moral Panic of 2017 has had some effect, the Gallup data suggests that the trend of women preferring male bosses over female bosses was already on the decline well before the Weinstein effect, and that most people actually say they don't care about the gender of their boss, which is not surprising. We all would like to avoid assholes in the workplace, and assholes are not confined to one gender. But if you do hear the claim about assertive women being punished in the workplace because of their assertiveness, you can say, yes, I agree, and it's mostly women that are doing the punishing. So it's time to come together and address this problematic behaviour, ladies. #TheWomen's Too. I'll see you next time.